What is up, you guys? This is Anthony Metro with the Anthony Metro podcast. And of course, the big news today, the Mets have fired Carlos Beltran. First, if you like this podcast, be sure to follow me on Spotify, radio.com, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Anthony Metro, where I post all the latest news, rumors, and highlights for the Mets and Major League Baseball. Well, it has truly been an astonishing week in baseball, concluding today with the Mets' announcement that they have parted ways with manager Carlos Beltran. On Monday, January 12th, Commissioner Rob Manfred and Major League Baseball released a 9-page report on the Houston Astros sign-stealing investigation. What was revealed through that investigation has had ripple effects across the entire league. Rob Manfred and Major League Baseball's Department of Investigations discovered that the Houston Astros did in fact use illegal methods to decode opposing teams' signs. Houston used video, including live in-game feeds, to decipher the signs given by the catcher. Members in the Astros dugout or from the base paths provided the batter with the sign through corresponding signals, including whistling and the banging of trash cans. In his statement, Manfred called it a player-driven scheme, with the exception of then Houston bench coach Alex Cora. In fact, Manfred and his team discovered that it was Cora himself who began to call the replay review room on the replay phone to obtain the sign information, and that Cora arranged for a video room technician to install a monitor displaying the center field camera feed immediately outside of the Astros dugout. So before we dive too deeply into the punishments that Manfred handed out, let's take a step back and examine similar events that happened prior to this investigation and how they affected Manfred's decisions. In September 2017, the Boston Red Sox were caught transmitting sign information using Apple Watches. Following this discovery, both Rob Manfred and Joe Torre issued memorandums to teams that future violations would be punishable. Manfred specifically stated that the general manager or field manager would be held responsible moving forward. Fast forward to Monday, and upon conclusion of his investigation, Manfred announced that the Astros manager A.J. Hinch and Astros GM Jeff Lunhow were both being issued with a 1-year suspension from baseball. Astros owner Jim Crane, who was cleared by Manfred and his team from having any knowledge of his team's activities, subsequently fired both Hinch and Lunhow. Alex Cora's punishment has been withheld for the time being. The 2018 Boston Red Sox won the World Series under Cora, who joined Boston after leaving the Astros, and they are being investigated separately for their own violation of these rules. So you can expect at the conclusion of that investigation that Cora will be dealt with very little leeway. So despite being dubbed as a player-driven scheme, only one player was named in the report: Carlos Beltran. In Manfred's one and only mention of Beltran, it is stated, approximately 2 months into the 2017 season, a group of players, including Carlos Beltran, discussed that the team could improve on decoding opposing teams' signs and communicating the signs to the batter. After nearly 3 days of a media firestorm, clamoring for the Mets to issue a statement regarding the allegations toward Beltran, the Mets announced that they and Beltran had agreed to part ways. Look, this entire situation was handled poorly from the very beginning. First and foremost, Beltran admittedly made a mistake in claiming that he had no knowledge of the scheme when Joel Sherman asked him about it in December. Secondly, a lot of the backlash that the Mets have received could have been avoided had they issued a statement on Monday or shortly after Manfred's statement was released. They didn't take swift action to immediately put out the flames, and that ultimately allowed this story to grow to the size that it did. Now look, personally, I would not have fired Carlos Beltran. I think it was unfair the way he was mentioned in the report, and I think that the team should have stuck to their guns and stayed with him rather than succumb to the noise from the media. However, Major League Baseball and Rob Manfred have some explaining to do in my eyes. As I've made very clear, the scheme was consistently described as quote-unquote player-driven, with the exception of Alex Cora. So why then is Carlos Beltran the only player named in the report? Now, look, I'm not naive. I understand that Carlos Beltran was named because he likely played an integral part in developing this plan along with Alex Cora. But that is not what the report says. The report only named Beltran once in the quote that I previously said. Look, it's very simple. If Beltran did in fact create and carry out the scheme along with Alex Cora, then I understand the reason for him being singled out. Baseball, I want to know, is that the case? If that is not true, then there would have been no reason to single Beltran out among a 25-player roster for a scandal that was, once again, considered player executed. This put the Mets into a precarious situation. It really was just a lose-lose situation for them. The writing of Beltran's guilt was clearly on the wall, but without it being overtly publicized. It left the Mets to have to pick up the pieces. It put them in the middle and left them to have to decide on Beltran's fate. Major League Baseball issued this story, and the media picked it up and ran with it. And after incessant demands for the Mets to make a choice on Beltran, they ultimately decided to, quote, mutually part ways, though in reality, it seems to me this was a firing. The Mets have a history of mishandling these types of events. Yes, I know it. And I will admit, the Mets did not handle this one perfectly either. But I have to say, I think it is unfair the way the Mets are being viewed for this one. Baseball, again, dropped this in the Mets' lap. They forced them to be the bad guy. They forced them to be the executioner in this situation, whereas MLB handed out the suspensions for the Astros, and eventually they will for the Red Sox with Cora. I said it earlier, it put them in a lose-lose situation, and it's true. Fire Carlos Beltran, and you're without a manager less than 1 month from pitchers and catchers reporting. Keep Beltran, and there's a dark cloud over his head and the organizations for employing a quote-unquote cheater. My issue with Major League Baseball and Rob Manfred's report is the way they quietly snuck Beltran's name in there. I mean, there's one mention of his name, and it's without any conviction or reasoning for his being singled out. Again, it's very simple, so I will just write it out for you, Mr. Manfred. Quote, Carlos Beltran played a key role along with Alex Cora in developing an illegal scheme to steal signs from their opponents. End quote. That's all you had to say. A clear and concise statement that articulates why Beltran was the only player mentioned. The way the facts are laid out in Manfred's report insinuates Beltran's involvement being more than that of the other players, but without directly saying it. Again, that is why the Mets were subjected to this horrible situation and ultimately ridiculed nationally for it. The Mets were blindsided by this. They were told Beltran would not be suspended, but they were not aware that he would be named. So I hold Mr. Manfred and Major League Baseball responsible for this, and I do believe the Mets deserve a formal apology for being put in this situation. I mean, basically a form of purgatory. Damned if they do, damned if they don't. So they had no choice really but to just continue on, and that is what they'll have to do at this point, and now they'll turn to their new managerial search. A few early names as of Thursday evening include Eduardo Perez, who was a finalist in their initial search this offseason, current bench coach Hensley Mullins, and Luis Rojas, who has served in many roles with the Mets organization. We have even heard about our old friend Terry Collins, who still holds a spot within the Mets operations. At this juncture, though, I think the Mets' best bet is someone with experience, and no, I do not mean Terry Collins. The Mets are in one of the oddest situations in all of sports, firing a manager before he managed a game for your team. Even more tricky with pitchers and catchers reporting very shortly. Therefore, I think it's in their best interest to find someone such as Dusty Baker, Buck Showalter, or if by some magic the Mets could swoon Bruce Bochy out of retirement, though I give that a less than 1% chance. My point is the Mets need someone with experience, preferably a long track record of winning and postseason experience. We're going to be going into this new season with a young team coming on the heels of this week's events, and I think it's crucial that they have an older manager that has the complete command and focus of his clubhouse. So that is it, guys. It was a crazy week. It was a roller coaster, as it so often is for the Mets. It was not one that we put ourselves on, though, and I hope Mets fans can take solace in the fact that at the very least, we were an innocent party in some very ugly events that went down. It just is unfortunate that we were caught in the fray. So thank you all for listening. I am going to be making some more YouTube videos very shortly, so look out for those and be sure to subscribe to that YouTube channel, Anthony Metro. Until next time, I am Anthony Metro. Let's go Mets.